At my mom's birthday, my son and I were placed in the Overflow tent outside. When I asked why, my dad said, "Well, you're kind of a wild card." I just walked inside, took my envelope with the $6,000 check off the table, and said, "You're right, and I'm wild enough to take this back." Then my mom ran out and shouted. It hit me harder than I expected. My son looked at me, confused, eyes darting between the sad little tent and the house where everyone else was gathering. He didn't even know how to react. He just stood there holding the card he made for Grandma with the glitter still drying. I smiled at him and said it was like a secret clubhouse just for the two of us. I made it sound fun. I even did a little spin and said we got the VIP table. It was complete improv. I was winging it, trying to keep it light, because that's what you do when you're a parent, and you suddenly realize your family has no idea what respect looks like. We had driven 2 hours. I had dressed him up. I had brought my mom a $6,000 check in a beautiful envelope with a thank you note tucked inside. I even added a bracelet from my son that said Grandma in crooked little letters. It was already all of it, and they stuck us outside next to the compost pile in a plastic tent with 2 chairs and no food. I spotted my dad pouring himself wine on the back patio. I walked up to him and asked why we were out there. He didn't look surprised, just mildly inconvenienced. Said, "Well, you're kind of a wild card." A wild card? I stood there for a second, then I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope. I held it up between us. "You're right," I said, "and I'm wild enough to take this back." He blinked, eyes narrowing on the envelope. I turned and walked straight through the house, past the cake, the flowers, and the family that apparently only extended as far as my brother and his wife. I grabbed my envelope off the gift table without hesitation. I had just reached the front door when I heard my mom's voice behind me, loud, panicked. "Lindsay, what are you doing?" I didn't turn around. My son was already by my side. I opened the door and stepped out. He followed, shouted after me that I was being ridiculous, that I was welcome inside, that I was her favorite. Her favorite. The desperation in her voice almost made me pause. Almost. I kept walking. She stood barefoot on the driveway, wine glass still in her hand, yelling after us, as the rest of the guests watched through the windows in stunned silence. And that's how the day started. It only got messier from there. The ride home felt like a tunnel. Quiet, stiff. My son just sat there holding the bracelet he made, not saying a word, like he didn't want to ask if we'd done something wrong. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just gripped the wheel like it was the only thing keeping me from unraveling right there on the freeway. I tried to make it feel okay. Told him we'd get burgers and milkshakes. We even played a guessing game at the drive-thru. But the truth sat heavy in the car and I could feel him picking up on it, even if he didn't know how to name it. By the time I tucked him in that night, I had 3 missed calls from my mom, 2 from my dad, and a few texts from my brother asking what happened and why mom was crying in the bathroom. I ignored all of them. I made tea, sat on the couch, and pulled the envelope from my bag, the same envelope that was supposed to sit proudly on that gift table. I opened it again and stared at the check. $6,000. I had saved for months, skipped trips, skipped new clothes, paid bills late. All because I wanted her to know that I appreciated her watching my son last fall when I was drowning with work and couldn't afford daycare. It was my way of saying thank you, and they stuck me in a tent. The next morning, the text came again from my mom. "Please don't punish me like this. Your father planned the seating. Then I didn't know where you'd want to sit. I didn't know you were even bringing a gift. Then Aunt Sharon asked about the check. I told her you gave it to me. I didn't want to be embarrassed. Can I please just have it now so this doesn't get worse?" That's when I felt it, the shift. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't upset that she hurt me or embarrassed me in front of my kid. She was upset she didn't get the check. I replied, "You lied to your sister, not my problem." Then I blocked her number. That afternoon, I heard a knock on my door. I looked through the window and saw my dad standing there, arms crossed like this, was just another lecture he was going to hand out. I stepped out and closed the door behind me, already knowing how this would go. He said, "You're really going to throw away your relationship with your mother over a few chairs." I didn't say anything. He stepped closer like that was going to shake me. Said she was in tears. Said I was embarrassing her. Said this was typical of me. Always overreacting, always needing to make everything about myself. So I didn't say anything. Then he said, "Just give her the check so we can all move on." I turned and opened the door, and he followed me in. That was the moment everything changed. My son was sitting on the floor with his Legos. He looked up when he saw Grandpa, unsure whether to smile or hide. My dad kept going, raising his voice, ranting about respect and family and how tired they were of my meltdowns. My son pressed closer to me, confused and a little scared. I told him to go to his room and wait for me. He didn't argue. He just walked away quietly. Then I closed the door between us and faced my dad. And I said everything about how they've always treated me like I was temporary, like I was only good for a laugh or a story, but never good enough to be taken seriously. How my brother could do no wrong, and I was the punchline. How they never even tried to understand what being a single mom really meant. How it wasn't a few chairs. It was a lifetime of being sidelined. He didn't interrupt. For once, he didn't try to argue. I finished by telling him to leave. He didn't hesitate. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to power settle in my chest. But it didn't end there, not even close. It started again the next morning. A text from my mom, this time from a different number I didn't recognize. I just want to talk. You didn't have to kick your father out like that. He was only trying to fix things. Then please don't keep the money over something so silly. That's not who you are. And then the real one. We need the car on Friday to get to Dad's doctor appointment. Can you drop it off Thursday? The $11,000 used sedan I bought for them last summer after their old one finally gave out. I paid for it outright, insurance too for the first 6 months, and told them it was theirs, no strings. Back then, I thought maybe that gift would change something, that maybe they'd see me differently. But now I saw it clearly. They, the constant requests for help. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a resource. So I texted back, "The car's not yours. It's registered to me. I'll be by Thursday to take it back." That set off a storm. Voicemails, dozens of them. My dad yelling, my mom sobbing, my brother getting involved, saying I was being cruel. Even a cousin texted to say I was overreacting and should think about how hard our parents worked. I didn't respond to anyone. On Thursday, I drove over with my spare keys, my son in the back seat, again headphones on this time. When we pulled up to their house, my mom was already outside. Her arms were crossed like she was trying to look composed, but her eyes were puffy. She walked up fast as I stepped out. "Please don't do this. We need the car. This is spiteful, Lindsay. You're better than this." I told her I wasn't. She tried blocking the driver door, standing in front of it like that would stop me. I didn't argue. I didn't push. I just stood there waiting until eventually she moved. As I backed the car out of the driveway, she yelled. She screamed loud enough that the neighbors probably heard every word. "You're ungrateful. We did everything for you. You're punishing us for nothing. In front of your son, this is who you want to be." I didn't flinch. I didn't even look at her. When we got home, I told my son to go play in his room. Then I sat down and made a list. Every single thing I had helped them with in the last 5 years. The money, the favors, the babysitting, the loan I'd forgiven for my brother when he forgot to pay me back. I added it up. I stared at the number and I made a decision. No more. From that day on, I cut them off completely. No money, no car, no emotional labor, no pretending like any of it was okay. But they weren't done yet. They started calling relatives, twisting the story, saying I stormed out of the party, that I screamed at my dad, that I stole the car out of revenge. And I wouldn't have even known about it if my aunt hadn't called me and said, "Hey, I don't know what's going on, but your mom is saying some wild things." That was the moment the story stopped being mine alone. Other people started paying attention, and not everyone was on her side. I didn't expect anyone to stand up for me. Honestly, I thought this would go the way it always did. Mom playing the victim, everyone else nodding along. Me being the difficult one who causes scenes. But something shifted this time. It started with my Aunt Carol. She called one evening while I was doing dishes. Didn't even ask how I was. Just jumped right into it. "So your mom says you screamed at your dad and stole their car. That true?" I laughed. Couldn't help it. I told her what actually happened. Not dramatic, just factual. The tent, the comment, the envelope, her. I laid it all out like I was testifying in court. There was a long pause on the other end. Then she said, "You know what? Good. It's about time someone called them out." That was unexpected. Then she told me something I didn't see coming. She said my mom had been going around telling people I'd been emotionally unstable for years, that she worried about my ability to parent, that I was too sensitive and explosive, and that's why they had to handle me carefully. All this time, I thought they were just dismissive, but they were actively undermining me behind my back to our family. And it didn't stop there. My cousin Mark messaged me the next day, said he heard what really happened from Carol. He told me they'd invited my parents over for a barbecue and confronted them. Full on called them out in front of everyone. Apparently, my dad got so flustered he left without finishing his beer. And that's when the retaliation started. My mom messaged me from yet another number. She said I was turning people against them, that I had poisoned the family, and that if I didn't stop, she'd have no choice but to protect herself. I didn't answer. 2 days later, she posted a long Facebook status, public, all about narcissistic daughters who punish their aging parents and how some people are just broken beyond repair. No names, of course, but it wasn't subtle. It was the most attention she'd gotten on a post in years. Then the real twist came. My uncle, her own brother, commented under the post. Or maybe some parents need to take a good long look at themselves before playing the martyr. The comment got 30 likes. Her post didn't even get that many total. By the end of the week, she deleted it. I could feel the momentum shifting. People were waking up to what I'd lived with for years. The lies, the manipulation, the way my parents had always controlled the narrative. And I realized something. I wasn't just cutting them off. I was finally reclaiming the truth. Out loud, in public. And I wasn't done yet. After that post and the fallout, things got quiet for a few days. I think they thought silence would scare me, that I'd panic without the chaos, or maybe that I'd come crawling back if they just waited long enough. They didn't understand that quiet was the most peaceful thing I'd felt in years. Then came the letter. A real one, mailed in an envelope with my mom's handwriting on the front, like she was suddenly the dignified one. I opened it in the kitchen while my son was watching cartoons. It was 3 pages long, rambling, desperate. She wrote about how hard her childhood had been, how difficult her marriage had been, how exhausted she was trying to keep the family together. She said I didn't understand the pressure she was under. Then she shifted tone, flipped it mid-sentence, and started blaming me. Said I'd always been dramatic, that I had a problem with authority, that I thrived on conflict, that I was poisoning my son with my bitterness, and he'd grow up resentful and broken unless I corrected course. It ended with a line that made my hands go cold. "You're going to regret this when we're gone, Lindsay." That was it. I sat there for a minute just staring at the last line. Then I folded the letter neatly, put it back in the envelope, and slid it into a drawer I hadn't opened in months. A drawer filled with old bills, expired coupons, and the last Mother's Day card she sent me, the one with a pre-written message and no personal note. And that night, I made another decision. I called the DMV the next morning and officially transferred the car's title back to my name. I contacted my lawyer and drew up a formal agreement, canceling the informal loan to my brother, complete with a payment schedule and interest. I even checked my parents' name off my emergency contact list at work and at my son's school. Then I emailed them both. Subject line, formal boundaries moving forward. I laid it all out. No more money, no more visits, no more contact unless it concerned my son and his safety. No more pretending. 3 hours later, my dad emailed back. One sentence. "You've lost your mind." I didn't respond. But that wasn't the end. That weekend, my mom showed up at my door. I saw her through the peephole, standing there with a bag of cookies and that strange smile she used when she was performing for an audience that didn't exist. I opened the door only a few inches. She started in immediately, said she didn't want to fight, that she just wanted to talk, that my dad had been out of line and she didn't agree with how everything had gone, that she missed her grandson, that she brought his favorite cookies. My son was in the other room, but I could feel her trying to use him like a rope to pull herself back in. I told her we weren't doing this anymore, that if she couldn't take accountability, then we had nothing left to say. She begged for pride, said I was ruining the family. I closed the door. She stood there for another minute before walking away. And from that moment on, I knew there was no going back. I thought that was it. The final door closed, the boundary drawn so hard it left a mark. But things hadn't really hit bottom yet. Not until the phone call from Aunt Carol, the same one who'd first stood up for me. She said, "Lindsay, you need to know something." And she sounded not angry, not sad, just tense. Turns out my mom had started spreading something bigger than the usual guilt trip stories. She told one of my cousins that I was being investigated by CPS, that someone had reported me for yelling at my son in public, that he seemed afraid of me, that I was unstable. It was a lie, a flat-out vicious lie. But she told it to the wrong person. My cousin Rachel works in the school district. She knows protocol. She knows how these things get documented, and she didn't buy it for a second. She called Carol, and Carol called me. It was surreal hearing it laid out like that. My mom had weaponized my son, She couldn't get her hands on the money, or the car, or control over me anymore. So she went after the one thing that could hurt me worst. The one thing she knew I lived and breathed for. That was the moment something hardened in me. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I got strategic. I emailed Rachel, thanked her for letting me know, and asked her to write down everything she'd heard. Names, dates, what was said, who it was said to. She did, and fast. Then I called my lawyer again. We drafted a cease and desist, harassment, defamation, attempted interference with custodial rights. It was airtight, brutal, and delivered straight to my parents' door via certified mail. But here's where it turned. The moment the letter arrived, everything went quiet. No calls, no texts, nothing. Like someone had finally put duct tape over the chaos. Until Aunt Carol called again, laughing. She said, "You're not going to believe what just happened." Turns out the letter scared them enough that they started scrambling. And one by one, relatives began showing up at their door, not to support them, but to return the favor. Uncle Rob pulled the family lawnmower out of their shed, said he only loaned it, never gave it. Cousin Rachel, who had been helping them with groceries on the side, canceled their shared delivery account. My brother's wife told me my mom called her crying because someone canceled their Netflix login. And then came the last straw. The church. They'd been telling people at their small-town church that I was estranged because I'd turned away from God and was choosing a selfish lifestyle. But apparently someone there had also heard the CPS lie. And when they asked around, they found out none of it was true. Word spread fast. My parents stopped showing up to services. My dad claimed he was sick. My mom told someone it was too emotional. But I knew what it was. They weren't just losing me. They were losing the image they'd built. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving them. I was free, and I was finally unapologetically happy about it. It's been 2 months, and honestly, if you had told me back then how this would feel now, I wouldn't have believed you. My house is quieter, calmer. My son laughs more, sleeps better. I didn't realize how much tension we'd been carrying, how much energy I spent bracing for the next guilt trip, the next manipulation, the next sideways comment meant to remind me of my place. We've built new routines, Saturday pancakes, Sunday hikes, weeknight movie nights with no phones, no drama. He asked me the other day if Grandma was still mad. I told him we weren't worrying about other people's anger anymore. He nodded like that made sense. As for my parents, they're living in their own fallout. The car's gone, the money's gone. And from what I've heard, even the friends they used to brag to have pulled away. Turns out people notice when your stories don't line up. They're keeping to themselves now. My brother still sees them, but it's colder. He doesn't ask me to make peace anymore. I think even he's starting to understand the difference between family and obligation. My Aunt Carol texts me weekly just to check in. My cousin Rachel invited us to a barbecue last weekend, and I showed up without having to worry about anyone talking behind my back. The best part? I don't miss them. I don't miss the performance, the constant calculating, the second-guessing myself every time I said no or didn't immediately give them what they wanted. I've learned that peace doesn't come from fixing broken people. It comes from choosing not to let them keep breaking you. And now we live freely, quietly, stronger.